All right, today we'll look at the reproductive strategies. So this is the second part of this chapter. Oh, that's going to annoy me. All right, so we're looking at sexual selection. So here it's a special form of natural selection based on an organism's ability to mate. Some animals possess characteristics that are more attractive to potential mates. Individuals with such characteristics mate at higher rates than those without, ensuring more next generation offspring will inherit the desirable trait. This is things like how the dance that they do to attract their mates. It's things like choosing certain, like in humans, it's choosing certain characteristics over other characteristics. So you might, as an individual, prefer people with blonde hair and blue eyes. That might be what you find attractive. So they're the mates that you're going to be pursuing because that's just your personal taste. So you're helping to have those characteristics be passed to the next generation. But here it's things like their dance. It can be that they how they clean, or in birds, how they build their nest. So in some cases, the male bird will build this elaborate nest to try and attract the female. And the better the nest, the more options they're going to have in terms of females. And then they pick the best female based on that. All right, so then you've got the intrasexual selection, direct competition among individuals of one sex for mates of the opposite sex, and it's often an aggressive behavior, male-to-male combat. So hippopotamus do that. Hippopotami is just plural of hippopotamus. And elephant seals, you've got things like lions, they tend to do that. So when they're in their pack and they make their offspring, when the male cubs start to come of age, they try and kick them out of their little tribe that they've got so that their offspring can't mate with their females. So they need to go and make their own tribe or die. And if the one dominant male for all of these females gets challenged, then it generally results in a fight until one surrenders and leaves, or until one of them is killed. So it's designed to show have dominance and have the strongest males being the ones reproducing to the next generation. So if they're not strong enough to fight off a challenger, why should their DNA be passed on to the next generation? That's what they're looking at there. So you've got mate selection, again, intersexual selection, indirect competition among individuals of one sex for mates of the opposite sex involves choice, and it's more the female choice. So before it was that competition of males. In this case, it's indirect. So it is the females choosing between males. So like the peacocks doing their dance, male peacocks fan out their peacocks and they do a little dance, their feathers, and the females choose which one is the best. So it's the same type of thing. The males are trying to display the best behavior in a certain area possible to try and attract a female mate. If their behavior isn't attractive enough, then they're not going to get a mate. They'll just be lonely and not passed on their DNA. You've got monogamy. This is one male with one female for one or more breeding seasons of their lifespan, and it's seen in species where survival of young requires the care of both parents. So in most humans, you're looking at monogamy, so one female to one male producing the offspring, and the two of them are needed to raise young. That's why it works in this system. I'm not saying that that's true. You can be a single mother or single father. It's just how this system works. So they're relying on someone else to help them. Okay? Yeah, that's monogamy. Canadian geese do it. Polygamy is when you have one male or one female and they have multiple partners of the opposite sex during a breeding season. So this male lion might have 5 females that he reproduces with every season. So it's one male to many females. There is polygamy seen in the human species, and their idea is that we weren't meant to be monogamous. We weren't meant, well, as we evolve, the longevity of our lifespans become quite significantly longer. So before, people would die when they were 40, so until death do we part was only like 20 years. Now you're looking at 50, 60 odd years with the one person. So in some people's minds, we're not meant to be monogamous for our entire lifespan with one person, and they look at they're looking at polygamy there. But it's also to do with you're looking at making like a group of people to care for the offspring, to care for the young. Or in cases where that one male can go reproduce with all these females and they just like, yep, that's it, I'm done. It's now your job to look after everything. So that's another way that they do polygamy. So you've got a couple of options. You've got one male to many females or one female to many males. So your example for one male to the many females, you've got your male lyrebird or your lion, and the one female to many males is your cassowary. That is an animal that they might ask you about because it is an Australian native. Typically in our biology exams, they tend to go with Australian natives of anything that they ask. All right, promiscuity, this is where their reproduction is just done basically as a whole group. So rabbits very much do this, and it's just males and females, and all the females can mate with all the males, and all the males can mate with all the females. It's just whoever wants to get with whoever else can do it. That's how rabbits work. And it's designed to have that genetic diversity, but also rabbits reproduce very quickly. So the quicker that they're able to do it, so if they're not relying on needing to attract someone, that can take a fair amount of time. So they're looking to reproduce really quickly. So if they don't need to try and find someone, they just go, oh, look, you're there, let's go. And then a couple months later, they pop out some baby rabbits. So that they're not being too fussy because they're looking at reproducing really quickly. What it means here, more common in males than females, is that it's more common for males to be promiscuous and mate with many, many, many different females in a group than it is for the female to just purposely go around and mate with many different males. You have to think there are very few species that go through the act of sexual intercourse for fun. There's only like humans and dolphins and a couple of others. So most of the time when they're doing this, it's for the purpose of procreation. They're looking at making an offspring as a result. So once a female's engaged in sexual intercourse, in their species, they don't really need to do it again. They're kind of like as soon as it's done, it's done. So once they've finished their little ovulation cycle, that's it. They don't need to try again until their next cycle comes around. So they're on heat for that certain period of time. They're not going to be going around doing it every day of the week. Okay, there is the quick and many in terms of number of offspring. So there the example is that octopus produce 100 to 40,000 eggs. And then the slower and fewer strategy, which is the humpback whale, produces one calf. So the quick and the many is relying on the sheer volume, the sheer numbers that they're producing to up their chances of survival, because they're not going to look after their offspring. They're just going to release the eggs, good luck, hope you survive, don't come back and see me again.
Why is that?
Because they're out in the ocean, they're going to be floating around. They can't stay with all of them.
But then the whales are out here.
Yeah, because the whales actually birth the offspring. And then it's to do with time as well. If you're releasing a lot of eggs, you don't need to hold on to them for very long, so you're able to look after your own survival a lot better. So think about a woman that's pregnant when she's getting close to 9 months. She's pretty slow. So if she was out in the wilderness, out in the Sahara Desert being chased by a lion, she's probably going to die. But the same thing happens here. So they want to try and get rid of, a lot of those species need to be able to move quite rapidly and need to think about their survival as a priority. So they release those eggs so that they're then able to go about their daily duties and not have to worry about it. Whereas the humpback whale, it's a bigger animal in the sea, so it has a lot less predators. There are a lot less things trying to kill the humpback whale than there are an octopus. There are still things trying to kill it, but just not as many. It's going to be higher on the food chain. So in terms of that humpback whale, it's able to look after its young for a lot longer, and they tend to stay together even after the offspring's born for a little while, a number of years. Whereas the other way is just, good luck. I've given birth to you, now it's your job to survive. Okay, you've got oviparity, and you've got ovipara. So this is where the eggs are released by the mother so that embryos develop outside the mother's body with nutrients from the embryo coming from the yolk. So this is things like chickens, toucans. Once the egg is fertilized, they push out the egg and the offspring grows inside of the egg, and they rely on the yolk. So if you eat eggs, the egg yolk is the nutritional part that sustains the growth of the organism inside the egg. The bigger the egg and the bigger the yolk, the better the chances of that organism surviving. So if you look at emu eggs or ostrich eggs, they're pretty big because the organism inside of that gets a lot bigger. So the yolk inside of them is pretty big as well. Alright, so there you've got ova meaning egg and paris meaning bearing. So then it's broken down to your prefix and suffix. Your baby sounds a bit cranky with your Lance. Alright, you've got the viviparous, which is offspring develop inside their mother and are released as live young. So this is what we do. The vivis means living and paris again means bearing. So we give birth to live young. Alright, you've got the ovoviviparous. Eggs are retained internally until hatching and then immediately released. So this is, some sharks do this. I'm not sure if you guys will see this when we go to the aquarium, but some sharks have like spiral eggs and they're released and then they stick onto things. Where some of them, they have the eggs internally, and then when they're in the right location and when the eggs are ready, they'll hatch out of the shark. So they're still in an egg and all the nutrients are contained within the egg, it's just inside the organism. Yeah.
The sharks do the same as the whales, where they look after the...
I think some do and some don't. It depends on the species. Alright, this one here is when the offspring are retained in the uterus after hatching. Nutrients are provided by the pup consuming developing eggs. So in this case, they're inside the uterus. It's a very cranky baby. The eggs are inside the uterus. The eggs have hatched and the offspring's come out, but it's still inside. Okay? So they've eaten all the nutrients inside the egg, they've eaten all of that yolk, and then they've hatched, and now they're still inside the uterus, and now they're going to start eating their siblings. They're going to start eating the other eggs.
Just inside?
Yeah.
That's cute.
That's not cute at all.
Spiders
It's
have
quite
that.
disgusting. So the options that we've had so far are that they lay eggs, so that the organism develops inside the egg, outside the body, or the organism develops inside of the body. So that's where they're looking at the uterus. The other option is there's an egg and the egg is inside the body, and when the egg hatches, it's delivered, or the egg hatches and the organism stays inside and eats the other eggs for more sustenance. Okay, the ones that develop inside the organism, they're relying on getting food from that mother. So like we've got placentas to feed our offspring.
If the sharks hatches, like if there's eggs in there and then two of the eggs hatch, do they eat each other or is it just they eat
Yeah.
eggs?
More than likely. There'll probably be a couple of survivors, but it depends. Alright, you've got parental care. So the emperor penguins, they're a monogamous pair, so that means that they don't look to find other mates. They've just got that one mate, and they pair for one breeding season, and they need to look after their eggs. So this is where they, put the egg on their feet to keep it off the ice, use their fat from their tummy and their feathers to cover the egg to keep it warm. And then one of them goes off to get food while the other one stays with the egg, and then they change over so the other one can go and get food. So in that case, that monogamous pair, they both need to really take care of that young. And then even when they're born, they still look after them for a while. So one will be with the young, one will go get food. So they're looking at fighting off predators.
Isn't it usually the dad and the second egg?
Yeah, but it depends.
Okay.
They can swap.
Don't
when they put like fish in their mouth.
Yeah, when they
Is that
pre-eat it and then regurgitate it
Gail
back up.
and the mom and dad do it?
I think so. Alright, we've got parental care. This one here is an example. So this is the Australian mallee fowl. Males build mounds made up from dirt, leaves and sticks from surrounding mallee forest. Once all the eggs are laid, the female will join in with the care of the mound. As the vegetation starts to decay, heat is generated and that keeps the eggs warm. Males and females will closely monitor the mound temperature, and if it's too hot, we'll scrape away some of the mound from around the eggs to allow the heat to escape. Sand and leaves will be scraped back onto them if they're too cold. So there, the two of them are looking at maintaining this mound so that other things don't come in and destroy it, but they're also constantly checking the temperature and moving things around to make sure it's right. And they're also going to be looking at adding more things to it, because as it's decaying, it's going to become smaller and smaller, so they're going to be adding more things to start decaying. So this is a pictorial example of that. And then you've got gastric brooding. So here you've got gastric brooding frog. The female swallows the fertilized eggs, converts her stomach into a uterus, and finally gives birth to fully formed young through her mouth. So gastric brooding is kind of like what it says, gastric being your gastric system, yes, your mouth and stomach. So instead of all of those digestive acids that we've got in our stomach, they convert that into a uterus. So that means that that animal can't eat for the entire time that it's got those organisms growing inside of its stomach before it then births them out of its mouth. Yeah.
How long is the baby?
Oh, it can't be that long. Like maybe a couple weeks. I'm not 100% sure though.
What big is that?